Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Tsinghua University has announced it will now require students to download and use a fitness monitor app on their smartphones. The app, called Forrest Gump Jogging, replaces a punch card system designed to ensure that students complete their physical exercise requirement. And it is stirring up controversy. Why should a simple app cause objection? How reasonable are the requirements imposed on students, and what exactly will the new device be monitoring? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Li Xi of Beijing Foreign Studies University and Dong Jun, the co-founder of Ever Beijing Limited. But before we start the interview, let's look at this.
Tsinghua University is requiring students to download a special running app in order to keep track of their physical exercise, despite past jogging programs causing complaints among students. The smartphone app is meant to ensure that students complete their extracurricular physical fitness requirements, said instructors at the school's athletics department, where mandatory fitness programs have been in place since 2008. The program requires male students to finish a 2-kilometer run under a set time, while females must run 1 kilometer. Freshmen and sophomores must successfully complete 21 jogs each semester. Students quickly found loopholes, however, such as riding the distances on bicycles while carrying their phones. School officials insist that such exercise programs benefit the student body.
The physics of college students have been worsening, and some college students do not like to exercise, and things are same here in Tsinghua.
A 2014 study found that 23% of Chinese boys under age 20 were overweight or obese, with the figure at 14% for girls. Alarming trends have also been seen in teenagers' cardiopulmonary function, eyesight, stamina, and running ability. A guideline released by the State Council, China's cabinet, has explicitly said that schools must guarantee that students have enough time for sports.
Welcome to Dialogue.
Thank you.
I think the focal point of the students' complaints has been whether it should be a compulsory requirement for the students to use the app on their smartphones. First of all, is it necessary? Second, Dongjun, is it something bad?
I think the essence of this discussion, of this controversy is, yes, not only about should we make it compulsory to use apps for students to jog, but also should we have compulsory physical education at university at all? So
that's the bottom line of our questions. Dongjun, what's your take?
Well, I think, I think it's based on assumptions about a reality that most or almost all students are using mobile phones very much. So they care where they are in the total rankings and how much they have achieved in daily jogging or exercises. But I think students from the upper stream and the very lower stream are probably those who complain most about these, because those who do exercises voluntarily, they don't care where they are, because with or without this app, they will do the exercises, and they don't want to get distracted by mobile phones. But those who are lazy enough not to do anything, for a whole week, would also be, among those who complain the most. Those who are in the middle may feel okay.
Li Xi, what's the average level of the students' physical fitness in your university? Is it necessary for the students to be involved in any physical exercises against their will?
Well, actually, it's interesting because before I came here in the morning, I asked my students in my class, because in BFSU there is similar compulsory policy that students need to pass the physical test. It's 800 meters running, and a lot of them say, well, yes, it helps, but without this requirement, probably they would not voluntarily choose to exercise. And a lot of people would think it somehow has a burden because it's a continuous requirement. Over the 4 years, every year they need to pass this test. So I think for college students nowadays their opinions tends to be more liberal. So what has been said just now, for a person, if he has the the habit of exercise, right? So regardless of what kind of way the school would provide, he would exercise. But a person does not have this voluntary exercising habit, application or PE classes, it's more of a form instead of really cultivating the student's habit of exercising. It shall be voluntary, it shall be self-motivated.
Also be, without being biased against, girls or from boys, I think it may have something to do with gender, because Madam Lee comes from a university where the majority of the students are actually young ladies. But Tsinghua's case, overwhelming majority of the students are boys. And boys may tend to be more athletic,
Well, I may share a little bit different view. Well, yes, most of the girls, but for a person to have a regular exercising habit, I think 800 meters is a piece of cake for those really regular joggers. Now, when I was 16 years old, I took part in our school sports meeting. I ran 3,000 meters. And then I feel it was very hard. But I did not keep that habit of jogging until now. But if I started from them and until now, 3,000 meters and even more, I think would not be a serious problem. So gender is one aspect, but it's not necessarily an aspect for students' performance in PE class. If a student, regardless of his or her gender, if he has a regular exercising habit.
Of course, it's true, the attitude may have something to do with the difficulty or level of difficulty each student faces, but I think Mr. Yang's question is mainly about whether it should be compulsory.
That's right.
The follow-up question should be whether this requirement should be based on extensive consultation with the students in the first place before it's released, before it is introduced, so that the impact or negative impact of students' complaints could be minimized.
Right.
After all, you need to keep in mind the pleasures and readiness of the students. If everything is ruled by decree, if everything is done by requirement, then it's going to be a problem.
Right. I think there are a series of topics like this that is controversial on campus. For example, university.
Excuse me, can you answer me directly?
Okay.
Whether this policy of physical exercise requirement is based on consultation, prior consultation especially?
From my personal perspective, no.
No.
No, it's required. It's like this. It has been passed down through years, and students enter the university, they need to do this.
Then do you think students should have legitimate reasons to voice their complaints and even lodge a protest against such a policy?
Yes, sure. I think to some extent, why Tsinghua University
then
has...
the next question is
yes.
whether students should qualify for a boycott.
Yes, if they have enough reasons to present themselves, and in this case, I see the reasons behind the students' complaint, because university education shall be education that respect, to some degree, individuals' choice and freedom. Then they should decide what they want to do, and they need to establish this very effective self-management system, because they're not high school students, not middle school or even younger students. At university level, schools should provide the necessary services and facilities to help students to cultivate their goal, but not directly setting the goal for students.
I think, the objectives or mission of a university before students and their parents decide to apply to this university absolutely include, training and education, not only of, science and literature, but also, or their special subjects, but also, physical training or physical education. It's part of their, compulsory education curriculum. So it goes without saying. It's the same like, the university authority decide on Monday what classes you should take. On Tuesday, whether you should have an English class in the morning or in the afternoon. It is no different from requiring the students to go outdoor and practice sports between a certain time, because science tells that the best time to do jogging may be between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. and that's based on science findings. So I think especially it's also an individual case, because no other university have followed suit so far. And Tsinghua is such a university with a tradition for many decades requiring students to go out of their classrooms to practice running or other exercises from 4 p.m. Whether you're concentrating on your homework in the classroom, the music comes out, asking you to go out. It's been around for, for many decades. It's just simply using a state-of-the-art application on a mobile phone to remind students instead of playing the music in the classroom.
Is that viewed by students as a violation of their privacy, individual rights?
Well, some people may argue that even allow students more flexibility.
It could be complained to say because I think it's 4:30 p.m. for freshmen of Tsinghua students, starting from 2014, they are asked to go out to join in these exercise. Well, I think the problem of that has been mentioned, because some students will complain, some students don't have the habit of exercising. It lies in our education system. Part of that it lies in our education system, but in the evaluation system, from the elementary level, did not actually give enough, let's say, requirement on PE education compared with other subjects like Chinese or English or mathematics. Well, a simple example is that the total score of college entrance examination does not require a PE part in that. So for students who come into university, they don't have a habit of exercising. Part of that is from very little, our PE education is not emphasized in terms of scores like other subjects, so that students would cultivate their habit of exercising from very young. In high school, because students have very heavy load of studies, their PE class time is marginalized from the time for their study, or even replaced by the time of study. So how could students automatically, actively cultivate a long-term exercising habit before they come to university? Now we come to university, we want to fix this problem, we use the requirement, we use the compulsory system. But the root of the problem lies in what happens before the university. I admit that this policy would do some good for students' exercise. But if you want to say you're cultivating students' habit, I think that policy, the effect of that, it's still minimum, because it still needs to start from very young.
Yeah, I agree. I think I should do more research about, primary and also junior middle school, the situation faced with those students in China. But I heard that it's been a while that China has introduced a new policy requiring all students to stop staying in the classroom from 3:30 p.m. so that they can allow some social classes in sports, science, and art to enter into campus. And I think it's actually laying the foundation for these students to get older and get used to more exercises requirements in senior high school or in colleges. But I think it's still an individual case faced with Tsinghua, because Tsinghua may be worried about losing their condition or compromising their tradition to future students, and they are adopting this technology application to encourage students to follow a very old tradition. And
we got it.
Well, I'm afraid it's a lot better to force students out of the classroom, ironically, after 4 p.m. each afternoon, then wake them up early in the morning, because many students refuse to get up early, refuse to be waken up by the use of loudspeakers installed on top of their buildings. A lot of international students complain a lot. Some of them even cut off the wire of the loudspeakers in protest against the abusive use of this loudspeaker. In their individual countries back at home, these international students never had such a quote-unquote bad policy, coercively urging students to leave their dormitory and get involved in morning exercise. So what do you think of this kind of a policy typical of China, which is labeled as the communist regime, and everything is well disciplined, as if you are living in a barrack?
Well, I think that to some extent, if we look at the broader picture, it reflects the educator's attitude to students. Somehow it's regulating them, because we don't actually trust that they could regulate themselves enough. But the other side of the opinion is that students should be trusted and respected to make their own decision, right? And I want to respond to Tsinghua's individual case mentioned by our other guest. I think even if Tsinghua do not require students to have this compulsory exercise, Tsinghua University does not lose its prestige prestigious and reputation as one of the best universities in China. I think what has established the Tsinghua, the spirit, of course, it contains students, good performance in all aspects, including PE class. But even without that compulsory policy, we still think that Tsinghua students, they are competitive, and that they are competitive, and they are in an environment that is already very, very suitable for their own personal development.
Well, in my own opinion, as a graduate from Tsinghua University in the late 1980s, I think, without such requirement for students to practice enough sports or athletic exercises, it's not Tsinghua. It's part of our culture. When you gauge students' competitiveness in the society, it's not only about the scores they scored, in science or other classes. It's,
oh yes,
physical education is included.
All right, thank you very much. You're watching Dialogue with Li Xi and Dong Jun. We're discussing whether it's a wise idea to encourage students, in fact, to require students from Tsinghua University in their use of app on the smartphones to accumulate enough physical exercise. That has caused a lot of debates and protests from the students of this most prestigious university in Beijing. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tsinghua University is often compared to the MIT in the United States, and therefore here is a question as to whether universities such as Peking University and Tsinghua should be internationalized, like drawing inspirations from their American counterparts. American universities, for example, often require students to take a physical education course as part of their studies. This course will be graded and counted as part of the overall academic record. However, there is generally not an extracurricular physical requirement, nor is there a general physical fitness test that students must pass. Which side is correct? Which side sounds more reasonable, the US or Chinese side?
I think just what we have discussed lies in the principal argument. So do we trust the students, let them to decide their own exercising habit, or not even exercising at all? Would we respect their choice? Or do we think we should regulate them? School is still the place to regulate students to cultivate these habits. But another face of this question is the efficacy, the effectiveness, whether the policy would work. I think in this that the compulsory education, probably the reality may stand against the compulsory PE class or PE requirement, because a person's habit is not actually cultivated through this application. And they are news, I think, as I read online, their students, they're trying to get around with this policy using other ways to cheat in the system. They may run in a bicycle, they may shake their cell phone. There are situations like these that students want to avoid running. Of course, that may be exceptional cases, but we could see that still, if we want to implementing this policy, we want this policy to work to the large extent.
Let me go back to the beginning of our discussion, Dong Jun. You raised a very interesting question as to whether this requirement is based on the assumption that health conditions of all students are declining in a tragic manner. Now, here is yet another question, I'm afraid, in parallel with the point you raised. Don't you think a wise policy should be based on wide consultation in the first place, and then based on the respect for differences in their physical conditions? Some are more fitable for harsh physical exercises, but some, particularly girls in the foreign language university, should be respected in a way they have more choice of their own, right? If they feel weak, they are not suitable for very tough running, jogging, or tennis playing. I mean, different forms of physical competitions. They should be respected. They should be encouraged to remain what they are. Dong Jun, don't you think this is an attitude towards respect? Or respect itself is an attitude, of course.
Yeah, I think it's very necessary. If we go a little deeper into this topic, we can find out more about the policy and also the related regulations and flexibilities it allows students. I think there should be some room for students to be, a little flexible. But again, I think it's the application or the mobile app is just a continuation of a very old tradition. And it even allows more flexibility because in the past, it only happens mostly, in late afternoon. But now it's a daily, requirement. You can finish your, your homework at night or very early in the morning. And so that means you have more flexibility. But again, I think each university, if you go to those universities in Britain or in New England in the United States, they still carry on a lot of heritage or their old traditions without compromising, without bowing to pressure for reform. And I don't think there are a lot of universities in China like Tsinghua will still uphold a tradition. They are flexible enough. They are always open to new ideas now. And again, by wide opening your mind to foreign experiences, you also need to be aware that whether your actual condition in China is ready to embrace the new policy or a new model.
Excuse me. What's the chance for this policy to be abolished amidst the background of strong protests from not only universities of Tsinghua itself, but from the society at large? Because this policy has indeed caused debates on the social media. Now, if you look at the impact of media discussions upon whatever decisions, either whether it's the use of yellow lights by the traffic authorities, or cancellation of e-bikes and express delivery motorcycles in Shenzhen, for example, that has caused strong protests from the social media. This time around, do you think universities such as Tsinghua would come under fire to such a degree where this requirement is likely to be abolished?
Well, I think at current stage, and we have a Tsinghua, and I'm not speaking here, to talk about cancel the policy, even though there may be a lot of students protest, that may not quite be practical very much. But I think if we want to make this to happen, then we need more students, their voice to be heard. We need to have more united way for the school or the Ministry of Education to hear the voice from
She's talking
students.
about adaptation, flexibility, to comply with the coercive policy instead of raising more doubts whether the policy should be urged for abolition. What do you think?
Once again, you should treat physical education as equal as those other classes, as English, mathematics, physics.
Why did Li Xi say it's not practical for the authorities to cancel this policy? Is it because of the hierarchical government characteristic of the Chinese culture or whatever?
I think Chinese, society is progressing, and authorities at various levels are learning to correct themselves. It's really happening. Like, in the past few years when there was a smog in Beijing, but, the authority, the Beijing government didn't have the courage to cancel the marathon. But now it is able to do that. And I think we are on this, in this course of progressing, and authorities in Tsinghua would have no excuse of correcting themselves if they are really found to be wrong.
I'm glad you put your finger on a very interesting point as to the popularity of a marathon and jogging nowadays in first-tier cities. And some of those crazy guys even went to different places around the world to get involved in marathon race. Why do we have this rise of the popularity for marathon and jogging, despite the hazardous fog that descends on first and second tier cities due to negative impact of industrialization and environmental decline? Why do we have this popularity of marathon?
Because I think I would like to combine the answer to your question to the response to the tradition that has brought up. I think is people still worship the tradition spirit of sport. So for university students, a lot of them actually they do not against the exercising itself. What they disagree is the way to exercise at university. So the spirit of exercising, we hold the Olympics, we have lot of extracurricular activities from kids. Parents educate their kids, you should have a very strong body, right? And So people know this spirit very well. However, nowadays, tradition should be updated with times. I see that for going back to our topic, this application, we can have this application. We can encourage students to download this application so that they can choose, right? And it should not just limited within one university. Different universities can all adopt, and it shall not just limited at university level. Now, younger kids from middle school, high school, primary school, if it is a really workable, effective application, it should be promoted, widely speaking, to teenagers in this nation, so that students can cultivate their habit from very early time. We still keep this tradition. We still keep this tradition of sport, but we do not have to require, in that case, everybody enter to university, you all have to do the same thing.
I'm not sure if the younger generation in the university would love the spirit of sports, despite the tradition of shadow boxing for the elder generation and ping pong, table tennis that eventually put the United States and China together in 1971. That's what we call the ping pong diplomacy. But I'm not sure if the younger generation love the sports spirit nowadays. So what's your take? Maybe you have more ideas.
Well, again, to your previous question, the popularity, I think my take on that question is because running is the most basic human exercise, activity that you can do, especially in the very overcrowded metropolitan areas like Beijing, Shanghai, those first-tier cities. It's a very natural choice. It doesn't require a lot of equipment, and it's flexible, and people can choose their own length to do running. And now back to the popularity of various sports, or among younger generations. Yes, indeed, I need to find out more about their mentality, but absolutely, from the top leadership of China to various educational authorities, they are actually looking for diversity or new varieties of sports so that they can attract young people to get into them. And you can no longer rely on, shadow boxing or ping pong to force them to practice. And that's why, the president of the country is encouraging younger children, to practice soccer and to explain the natural beauty of soccer and how much it can create, opportunities, not only in medal winning, but also in job opportunities and business opportunities. And I think when, looking around at the society outside of campus, the increasing popularity of running, then school authorities like those of Tsinghua would, we don't have an excuse to encourage our students who are very young, from 18 to 22 years old, to practice more jogging.
Well, perhaps the behind jogging is a huge lucrative industry about the fashion. Being sporty is after all part of a fashion, quite in vogue nowadays in the 21st century. Thank you very much for participating in this discussion about jogging. That's very controversial in Tsinghua University. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.